Hi, friends. Welcome back. I'm Chad Hayenga, filling in for Stacy Bellward today here on the Connected Families podcast. Welcome to our community. We are people committed to pursuing God's grace and truth for ourselves and then daily working to pass that grace and truth on to our children. I'm so glad you're here. We're at the end of our 4-week Back to School series. Last week, we did an audio blog from one of our most visited blog posts about separation anxiety at daycare or school drop-off. We want to support you this school season, and if you missed any of these episodes, feel free to go back and give them a listen. Today, we're shifting to something a lot of parents deal with once the school year is underway, and this episode is also an audio blog. We adapted it from 2 of our written posts. We put the original articles in the show notes. Okay, friends, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like your child just doesn't care about their grades? No matter how much you push, encourage, remind, or worry, it barely seems to make a dent. If that's you, I want you to know that so many parents feel exactly the same way, and today's conversation is for you. We're going to talk about what happens when our worry about our kids turns into pushing, and how that pushing can actually work against the very thing we're hoping for. Then we'll walk through a different way forward, one that's rooted in God's truth and built around the 4 messages of the Connected Families framework. After that, we'll take a closer look at one of the most freeing questions a parent can ask. Whose problem is it, really? There's a lot of hope in this one, so let's dive in. So here's the situation. It seems there's a problem. Grades don't matter to your child. They just don't care, or at least that's how it looks. You know, grades aren't the most important thing in life, but they are important. You want your child to understand the connection between working hard and thriving later in life. So you're worried, maybe a little upset, and you might find yourself pushing your child toward improvement. And somewhere in that struggle, a familiar pattern shows up. Parents feel frustrated and push harder. Kids resist. The tension grows. Parents feel more responsible. Kids feel less responsible, and everyone ends up discouraged. Here's the hard part. That spiral makes compassion and grace really hard to come by. The fruit of God's Spirit becomes tough to access. You want to nurture kindness and perseverance in your child, but in those heated moments, you may be unintentionally modeling defensiveness and performance-based worth instead. Before we get to solutions, I want to share some research worth sitting with. Studies found that poorer outcomes showed up among children who perceived that either their mothers or fathers valuing their achievements more highly than they valued being kind to others. Those kids experience more depression and anxiety, more acting out behaviors, and lower self-esteem. And here's the part that might surprise people. Those same students also had lower GPAs, and teachers reported more learning problems and disruptive behavior at school. So pushing doesn't even get the results we're after. You have good intentions for your child. Let's look at how those good intentions sometimes get derailed and how to more effectively guide your child toward taking responsibility for their own grades. Here at Connected Families, we've coached many parents as they've found ways to gracefully encourage their kids' responsibility without straining the relationship. Here's the heart of what we've learned. First, it helps to understand the cycle that tends to unfold. We call it the anxiety-nagging cycle, and it almost always begins with anxiety. Let me walk you through it. It starts when anxiety about your child's future makes you worry that avoiding hard work will become a lifelong pattern. Your child picks up on that worry and absorbs the message, I am irresponsible. That belief discourages them, so they actually become less responsible, slowly living into that negative projection. Then, watching them struggle, you feel tempted to start doing things for them that they could do for themselves. As you take over more and more of their responsibilities, resentment grows on both sides. And you feel even more discouraged and anxious, so the whole cycle just starts over, with the relationship more and more defined by tension. Here's the thing. When we regularly do things for our kids that they can do for themselves, it sends a quiet message. You are incapable of doing this on your own. So instead of nagging your child to perform, what if you focused on something different? This is where the 4 You Are messages of the Connected Families framework come in. These 4 messages breathe life back into your relationship and over time into your child's sense of responsibility. Let's walk through all 4. The first message is this: you are safe with me, even if you struggle in this subject. Thoughts like, if my child is failing now, what will it look like when they're older? It tends to fuel more anxiety and more pushing, and the cycle just rolls on. But when we learn to think differently, anchored in God's wisdom, we can begin a new, more hope-filled cycle. Let me give you a few reframes to try on. You might tell yourself, if my child struggles in this class, they have an opportunity to grow and do better next time. Or, I know my child has worked hard before at things that are important to them. Or, God has significant plans for my child, regardless of their report card. Here's a powerful one. My child is not my report card. Their grades are theirs, not mine. And finally, this is an opportunity for my child to truly internalize my unconditional love. In Matthew 12:34, Jesus says, the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. What you believe in your heart towards your child will come out of your mouth. So listen to what you're saying, both to others and to yourself, about your child's struggles. Anchor yourself in God's truth and then start to speak the truth in love out loud. The second message is you are loved no matter what grade you get. Now, it's not always natural to feel and express love when a relationship has held a lot of conflict. But finding and expressing that love to your struggling child sets a tone that reflects Christ's love. You can start small with affectionate words, playfulness, or a little empathy. Something like, you know what? Math was often hard for me too. I get how frustrating it can be. As that lighthearted affection begins to land, you'll often notice your child's defenses start to soften. Then maybe you leave an encouraging note before a big test. And afterward, you do something special together, no matter how the test turned out. And remind your child that they are fearfully and wonderfully made in God's image. When your child understands that their identity comes from the value God places on them, they can truly internalize that they are accepted and loved no matter what. The third message is you are called and capable of doing your schoolwork. Here's the thing. Of all the things your child feels, capable is probably the least. A struggling child is almost always a discouraged child underneath. You could say, I noticed you passed 3 classes last year. In trying to push you toward math, I didn't celebrate the success you had in those other classes. I want to do a better job of noticing all the things you do well. Naming even the smallest effort is an encouragement. And believe me, the effort is there if you're willing to see it. Philippians 4:8 teaches us to focus on whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable. Think about these things. You can also start the semester with a few capability building questions. Just be prepared for indifferent or negative responses and try not to react to them. You might ask, how would you like school to go this year? And you may hear, I don't know. Or ask, what kind of grades are you hoping for? One child actually answered D+. Or try, what help do you want or need from me? And a discouraged child might say, none, I'll be fine. Just leave me alone. And that's okay. You're planting seeds. And if you realize you've been overly involved, it's okay to reset. You could say something like this. I think I've been too involved in your schoolwork, and it's created some distance between us. Would you agree? I don't want that kind of relationship anymore, and I am really sorry. I want you to be responsible for your grades because they're yours, not mine. I believe that you can do it, and I want to support you however I can. How about we check the parent portal together once a week, maybe on Fridays? I won't lecture or criticize. We'll just both know where things stand. But here's what I really want you to hear. The heart of you are called and capable isn't actually about schoolwork at all. The weight you place on grades will start to lighten as you consider the other values worth nurturing in your child: faith, kindness, integrity, perseverance, creativity, resourcefulness. In fact, that same research found the best outcomes were among children who perceive their mothers and fathers as each valuing kindness towards others as much as or more than achievements. Even something as simple as changing your dinner table conversation can speak volumes. Instead of, "How did your math tests go today?" you might ask, "How are you a blessing to someone today?" Or, "What did you feel good about today?" Or, "How did you work hard today?" Proverbs 3, verses 3 and 4 puts it beautifully. "Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the table of your heart, so you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man." And that brings us to the fourth message. You are responsible for your classes and your schoolwork. Now, most parents want to begin right there, but it's actually not the place to start. When your child's academic performance is underwhelming, keep those first three messages in mind as you nurture responsibility. So during your Friday check-in, if your child has fallen behind, a natural result might be a lower grade or the need to negotiate with a teacher about catching up. And honestly, negotiation is a great skill to develop. If some basic, clear expectations aren't met and a more immediate result is needed, you can put a consequence in place, but do it with grace and kindness. That actually makes it more effective because your child will sense that it's about their best interests and not your need for control. For example, you might agree together to set aside a weekend privilege that tends to distract from studies. Remember, your child is learning to be responsible for their grades, their choices, their time management, and ultimately their whole life. They are growing. They are a work in progress. God expects us to make mistakes, knowing those mistakes can become wonderful learning opportunities. And sometimes our children's stumbles teach them more than their successes ever could. Galatians 6:7 says, "A man reaps what he sows." As we give our kids more freedom to experience that sowing and reaping principle for themselves, we get to relax into being their mentor instead of their manager. So here's where that title finally makes sense. When grades no longer weigh so heavily on you and the responsibility gently shifts from you to your child, you're finally free to empathize with and encourage your struggling child. And that builds a connective relationship instead of an adversarial one. I know this can feel like a big step, maybe even a scary one, but your family is so worth it. If this resonates with you, the whole approach really starts with one key question. Whose problem is it? And if you're walking through a season where your child seems unmotivated and you feel unsure how to free your family from all of this anxiety and tension, consider walking through it with one of our parent coaches. We would love to work with you on this. That question, whose problem is it, is such an important one that I want to spend a little more time on it. It's the principle behind so much of what we just talked about. And we will do that when we come back from the break.
Do the same challenging moments seem to show up every single day in your house? Bedtime that stretches on and on, screen time that turns into a tug of war, chores, meals, and those familiar power struggles that leave everyone worn out. Well, what if those daily challenges could actually become opportunities for your child to grow in confidence? That's the heart of our online course called Healthy Rhythms for Daily Life. When kids know what's coming, they can prepare themselves for it, and that steady rhythm helps them feel more secure. Inside the course, you'll learn how to create a bedtime routine that truly works for your family. You'll get practical tools to find a healthy balance with screens, discover the happiness trifecta that helps chores become less like a chore, and brings joy to the table by easing those mealtime power struggles. Well, it's just $24, and you can watch the lessons at your own pace with a full year of access. Ready to build healthy rhythms in your home? Find all the details in the show notes today.
I'd like to finish the podcast today spending a little bit of time on the question, whose problem is it? Deep inside most of us as parents, there's a strong urge to control our children. It can seem helpful. It might even work for a few years. But there are diminishing returns if we don't let go of that control in a big way by the teen years, and probably even earlier than that. Here's what happens. When we take control of our kids' lives, we often end up making decisions for them that they're perfectly capable of making on their own. But maybe even worse than that, when we take control away from our kids, we rob them of something important. We deprive them of learning that they can make choices and live with the results, whether those results are good, bad, or somewhere in between. When we micromanage our kids' lives, they learn that we're responsible for their life, not them. Let me give you an example. There was a couple who had gotten into a habit of commenting every single morning on their teen daughter's tangled hair and poor hygiene. They said that most days they just couldn't help themselves. They felt like they had to say something because it was so embarrassing to them, and they believed she was missing out on friendships because of it. Every so often, their strong feelings led them to sit her down and brush her hair for her. And here's the thing. No one enjoyed that interaction, not one single person in that room. So often, conflict shows up when we assume control of something that was never ours to control in the first place. And answering one question can be a great starting place to avoid this kind of conflict. The question is, who owns the problem? To help figure out where the weight of the problem really lies, it can help to answer some more specific questions like these. Does my child know how to do this? Has my child ever done this without my help? Is my child aware of how I feel about this? Does my child want my help? And does my child see me as an ally or a foe in this situation? These kinds of questions help us hold appropriate boundaries around who owns what, because they remind us that our kids are capable. And here's a bonus. If the answer to, does my child know how to do this, is no, then we get to help our child grow into owning the problem. We teach them the skill they're currently missing, and then we set them free to take responsibility for it. Here's another key way to figure out who owns a problem, and it's this. Who cares more about it, the parent or the child? If you tend to care more about the clean dishes, the tidy room, the combed hair, the good grades, and the sibling squabbles, then guess what? You own the problem. Now, there are times when a parent and a child share ownership pretty equally, like managing medications or a health concern. But a lot of the time, when we get honest about who cares more, the answer is us. Once we've figured out who rightfully owns the problem, we can take some really helpful steps. We can let our child feel the weight of it so they get to decide what they want to do about it. Let's go back to that couple with their daughter. As they worked through this issue, it became clear that they were stuck because they'd gotten tangled up in something that wasn't actually their problem. When they walked through those questions about the conflict over their daughter's hygiene, they realized it was clearly her problem. And since she already had the skills to handle it, they could reframe the whole thing. This wasn't their problem to solve. It was her opportunity to grow and take responsibility for her own life. And here's the truth I keep coming back to. It's not our job to take over other people's problems, not even our kids. It's their life, after all, right? We guide, we shape, we help mold them, but ultimately, we don't decide. We're here to teach them wisdom and walk alongside them. We're not here to run their life. That's their job. So let's apply this right now. Take a minute and think about it. What areas of your child's life are really frustrating you lately? And based on what we just talked about, who really owns that problem? Is it yours or is it your child's? And here's the big one. What could you do to hand that problem back to your child and help them feel its weight while you step into a different role as their encourager and their supporter instead? It takes real courage to step back. But when we let go of that control, we make space for our kids to grow. We make room for God to work in their hearts. Thanks for tuning in today, friends. Hey, quick question. If you have been a listener for a while, or if this was your first podcast and you found it helpful, would you tap through and give us a review? Those reviews are so helpful. Connected Families is a nonprofit ministry made possible by The Table and our generous donors. The Table is a group of people from around the world who are committed to Christ-centered transformation in families. Their monthly giving equips parents and caregivers with biblical and research-informed resources. These tools cut through the overwhelm. They guide parents well. Would you consider joining us at The Table today? For more information about Connected Families, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or visit connectedfamilies.org. We'll see you next time.